All right. Welcome to another episode of Deal Makers. As you can see, I am here with the one and only Nick Miner. Phoenix famous, maybe commercial real estate famous. Nick, do I call you Professor Nick now? What's appropriate?
Depending on who you ask, right? I know Ari likes to call me the professor here at the office.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you guys all for tuning in. If you're joining us live, please make sure you say hello, interact, ask some questions, drop some nuggets or additional commentary on whatever we're talking about. In fact, if you're watching the replay, you can do that same thing, and Nick and I will make the commitment to respond to questions or follow up with you guys on LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook or wherever you're watching this. A lot to cover today. Nick, let's see. We're talking about commercial real estate, why that makes sense, or I always joke about dollars. Your favorite tech tools in commercial real estate, what you're teaching, who you're teaching, what your favorite investments are right now. And I always like to hear what you're working on, what you're buying. Let's go through a couple noteworthy transactions and then also talk about some of the client work that you're doing. So I think it makes sense to begin with a quick intro. Would love for you to take 30 seconds and kind of pack your entire life and career into about 30 seconds and kind of bring us up from the beginning to today and what's relevant for people thinking about investing in commercial real estate now. You're an expert. Let's hear those qualifications.
Geez, thanks, Sean. Very high bar being set right there. So, for me, it was kind of a fluke to get into commercial real estate business. Originally, back in college, I had this mindset of being an accountant. So I was going to be a CPA by trade, and a fraternity brother of mine who probably will end up making some sort of snarky comment at some point said, "Hey, why don't you go take this real estate class with me while we're at University of Nebraska, Omaha?" And I said, I got an extra, slot to fill, so why not? And so I took a class, still my mindset going down the CPA path, and kind of liked it. Never really thought about real estate, right? I mean, you're kind of walking in and out of buildings all the time, going grocery shopping all the time. You just never really think about owning or working on commercial real estate. You just kind of thought that was just something somebody else already did.
Yeah.
And so, ended up liking what I learned, and just the professor is a small school back in Nebraska, a small major, and the people were great. It was, still had the financial kind of underwriting background that, I like to do. But it had a aspect of the human side, which is interacting with just good quality people, which, in CPA, accounting, that kind of stuff. Yeah, besides you. But, just good quality people that, were very, helpful or wanted to see you be successful. And it was definitely different than, grinding it out 80 hours a week, going down the path of being an accountant. So, I was very blessed to have had an internship with a small firm in Omaha. It's the largest independent firm. Is called the Mega Company. Slowly became a partner office at CB Richard Ellis. Might have heard of them.
Yep.
And did a lot of I got in doing cell site selection work. So I was doing cell site selection work back in 1998, going out talking to farmers about, hey, do you want to make an extra $1,000 or $1,500 by just letting us put a cell tower on your farmland over in the corner? And so I did that for a couple of years, and it was very interesting, just kind of learning, dealing with people, doing the research and all this other stuff. And that really kind of triggered me to want to learn more about commercial real estate, and I just very lucky to have been with 50 top producing agents in a small market that I got exposed to leasing, sales, every property type, been there. And that helped me for sure kind of have a broad base and understanding of all the different property types and kind of the intricacies of each one. So, yeah. So definitely a generalist coming in Omaha. So.
And then let's get into the transition to Phoenix.
So that's always a fun story too. While I was back in Omaha and I was still in college, I actually took a CCIM class in Scottsdale, Arizona before I graduated, going down this path of commercial real estate. And, it's August Scottsdale. It was 115 degrees outside, and I'm like, oh, this isn't bad. I could get used to this, right? And like, there's no snow. I know, right? Typical, guy from the Midwest who thinks, oh, this isn't bad whatsoever. And it was just fascinating because I was literally a stone's throw from my office. I still see the hotel from my office now
Yeah.
of what really kind of triggered the idea. So, while I was in Omaha, I was, out of college. I was starting to get a really good stride in this industry, doing leasing and sales in a small market. But I knew that once you kind of start your commercial real estate career in brokerage specifically, it's very hard to transport to another market.
Mm-hmm.
And I was never committed to staying to Omaha long term. I was a transplant from Kansas up there, so I looked at Austin, Texas. I looked at Phoenix and San Diego. Couldn't afford the beach house in San Diego like you over there, and so didn't like the bugs in Austin, and it still got ice down there. And I'm like, hey, that week I spent in Scottsdale, if that's the worst it is, I'm there.
Right.
So picked up and moved in 2001. Been here ever since.
20-year anniversary.
I know, this month actually, so it's pretty crazy to think that.
Well, and I guess we'll fast forward all the way to today. So obviously you've got a ton of diverse experience, a couple geographies. What is if you were to say you had a niche or a specialty that like maybe differentiates you from, all the other awesome brokers out there, what's your jam?
So if it's a problem property, there's a high probability it ends up on my desk. If it's just a cookie cutter deal, there's plenty of guys that can absolutely do that. But if you need something that's got some sort of issue, whether it be a zoning issue, dealing with the municipality, looking at a vacant building, trying to figure out what's next, what to do with it next, how can you maximize value? That's definitely seems to be where I end up spending a lot of my time. What I like to work on is multi-tenant and single tenant retail properties. That's where I would say the majority of my business is. And how that happened was in the early 2000s, back when the market was really hot in 04, 05, 06, I was selling a lot of apartments around ASU doing student housing before student housing was really mainstream. And, we kind of saw the writing on the wall when we saw cap rates drop down to 6%, price per unit's like 100,000 per unit, which is nothing today. But saw some of the writings on the wall of, what should we do next for some of my clients that had accumulated wealth. And I said, well, why don't we transition to a different product type where more long-term tenancy, less management intensive. You can actually outsource the management to a third-party manager, and a lot of my clients from that era, we just sold apartments at the top of the market and helped them transition into 7.5, 8 cap retail centers. They're selling apartments at 6. And then we had financing, low rates of like 5.5, 6%.
You're right.
Right, yeah, and so then just stayed in touch and helped a lot of people just kind of redeploy capital into a different asset class, and just stayed in touch with them and helped them just kind of keep growing their wealth, kind of more of a tortoise approach versus the hare approach.
Mm-hmm. My suspicion, and you keep me honest here, is that you're seeing maybe more of that right now than ever before. It just feels like money is pouring into Phoenix from all over the country, in a lot of asset classes.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Right now, I'm starting to see the transition of product jumps again. I've got a couple clients that I'm helping right now that I almost feel like I'm repeating something from 15 years ago. Had a fourplex or duplex over in California. got offered a great price,
Yep.
sold it for $1 million and said, okay, I was getting really no return. It was all appreciation, no cash flow.
Yep.
And you're telling me, Nick, I can buy this, $2.5, $3 million either single tenant asset or multi-tenant retail center and actually make 6-7% on my money? Sign me up.
Right.
So here we are again. And so that's the reason why you haven't really seen a whole lot of inventories, because if it's good location and just good mix of tenants, it's getting snapped up pretty fast.
Well, and maybe you're answering the question that I really should have asked you more specifically. So is that, why commercial makes sense? I think of, bigger apartment buildings as commercial too, but, someone moving out of a duplex or a fourplex, I maybe wouldn't consider that commercial, into, a shopping center or a retail or a single tenant deal. I know I wasn't aware of it in the beginning. I bet a lot of, mom and pop landlords in California or your coastal towns may not be aware of this other world. You see, triple net listed in places, and people could go cross-eyed when they see that. And I've told people, I think the same thing that you shared. It's like, hey, by going over to Arizona, I'm getting in a landlord-friendly state. I'm getting maybe double the cap rate, possibly more than double the cash on cash return. And you're in a market that can cash flow and is growing like crazy versus one that's, maybe, like you said, just playing the appreciation game.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, so yes, I work with a lot of first-time investors that have read a book or heard about this thing called commercial real estate or something to that effect, and so that kind of plays into why I like to teach, is because I value the relationship. So I've been doing this for over 20 years, and if somebody comes to me like asking for help, I'm definitely serve a heart. I want to help people and I want to see them be successful, because the rising tide of helping clients grow their wealth, I get to participate in that. And so, a lot of times, first time investors, again, like I said, they've sold something, heard about this commercial real estate, and I joke, when I first meet with a lot of these individuals, it could be 18, 24, 36 months before I ever help them actually buy something.
Yep.
And that's fine. I mean, I am definitely not the press hard, sign here, got to buy this deal or you're going to miss out. I'm more of the opinion of like, hey, the right deal that you feel comfortable with, that's the deal you buy. You don't force anything.
Lots of good things you brought up there. Let's pivot to the teaching for a minute. I'd love for you to tell us, what you're teaching, who, when. Let's hear the Professor Nick side of your life.
Oh God. So teaching was kind of one of those things that you just don't know, right? So CCIM, because I'm heavily involved in that trade association, back in 2008 or 9, they were doing kind of a casting call for having additional instructors, and I just knew how much I enjoyed going through the CCIM education and being able to learn from some of the top minds in the country. And I said, well, that would be awesome if I could ever maybe give back as part of being either an instructor or something. And so back in 08, 09, they were doing a casting call, taking kind of a new small class. And I filled out the application. I did not get selected. And the rationale was I didn't have any teaching experience. And I'm like, well, that makes a lot of sense. I get it. So then about that time is when Bill Gray, who owned the Arizona School of Real Estate and Business, had sold the business to Don Miner, who's a local attorney. And him and his wife, Elaine, were going to grow the school of real estate, and they really wanted to add a commercial real estate component to the education for CE training and stuff like that, continuing education. And so I literally sent an email to Don. I'm like, hey, Don, if you really want to get serious about commercial real estate, I'd love to be an instructor. Just let me know what I need to do. And so I send that. He's like, oh, that'd be great. We're actually talking about adding this as, an opportunity. And then I didn't hear anything. I filled out some forms. And then it was like I want to say it's 4 months later, I get a call from scheduling saying, "Hey, do you want to teach this class this week?" I'm like, "What? I mean, they like totally got me off guard. I'm like, wait a minute, is there like any training? Do I need to do this? Do I need audit? I mean, what am I teaching?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like commercial real estate. I just kind of jumped in, built the parachute on the way down, and said, "Let's go do it." And so I've been teaching continuing education classes for the School of Real Estate and Business now for over 10 years, and
Awesome.
I love it. It's great because I only teach the commercial real estate classes, and what's really fun is when colleagues in the industry are in that class, and competitive colleagues, or I call them, a lot of them, friends now, and I pick on them the whole time in that class, and they know who they are, because usually when they take my class, I'm like, "All right, Tom, we're gonna pick on you today."
You made me think of, a lot of folks ask me, they're kind of like, their interest is sparked in commercial real estate, and they wonder, where do you turn to begin the journey, like to get a foundation? Would you do a school like you were talking about, or a CCIM, or you start with a book? Like, where would you direct people today, or would it be a couple things, or just go call Nick?
or call Sean. I mean, you're on the other side of it, on the ownership side. So start over there. Then if you can't make it on the ownership side with Sean, then give me a call. How about that?
Yeah.
No, so I mean, there's a couple different paths. It just depends on what your interest level is. And I think that is really what you need to figure out is, do you like interacting with people daily? Are you prepared to be, 100% commission based? Or are you looking to be more operational, like on the management side of things? Or do you like to source, work on the loans or the lending? I mean, there's just so many different aspects of what you can do in commercial real estate that most people don't think about. And, like I said, I worked for an appraiser, I worked for a bank, and then, I ended up in brokerage doing site selection, and I found a passion, a calling. And so for me, it was pretty simple. And then, I had the wisdom and guidance of, like I said, some of the top agents in Omaha that said, "Hey, if you really want to be successful in this, go get your CCIM." Mm-hmm. And so, that was the very first thing I did. And the reason being was it gives instant kind of credibility dealing with other owners about, hey, I actually know how to calculate NOI. I actually know about demographic analysis. I actually know what economic-based employment means, and can understand those kind of things. And a lot of that came from taking those classes, in addition to already having kind of a background in accounting and real estate from college. And so, and then the people that you meet, or like I said, some of the best people you'll meet in this industry for sure. And it's just like anything, find your passion, find kind of what you like to do, and then just, go after it. Go to that. I guarantee there's a trade association associated with it, right? So like for us, ICSC, if you want to be involved in retail, guess what? You're probably going to be involved in some of the things at ICSC. If you want to do apartments, you're probably going to get involved with the Arizona Multi-Housing Association. I mean, there's just so many different ways to go, and so many great people that you could talk to that could really kind of, make the introduction. If you're a new person, just try to find a couple people that you can go grab a cup of coffee with, talk to them, see if they can make some doors or some introductions for you, and then just go after it.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And you brought up a good point too. I think knowing, where you want to head, if you're making a career out of real estate, you might be thinking about brokerage or landlord or something like that. But, there's a whole separate world of people who just want to invest and park capital and do it passively. And so that might require, kind of different groups or different levels of knowledge where, it can be, more set it and forget it for some of these deals, or it could be very active, heavy lift type stuff, or, you could be like Nick, spending 80 hours a week cranking away on commercial real estate. So you got the whole gamut there.
Probably not 80 hours a week anymore. It's that overnight success and 20 years in the making now. So
and let me just remind anyone listening, if you guys have any follow-up questions for Nick, go ahead and type those in. I'm going to keep cranking with a few that I have here. I like tech, Nick. You like tech. Let's talk about some of your favorite tech tools and maybe how it benefits the users of those tools, or by way maybe your clients. So would love to hear what you're using and how.
Yeah, you bet. So obviously, outside of this, right, we all have these things, our phones. You know, I'm going to sound like a dinosaur. So real fast, back in 1998, when I got into the business, I walked around with a 3-ring binder. I went and took those photos to get developed at Kodak. Then I went down to the county courthouse, looked up ownership information on one level of the county courthouse, then had to go someplace else to the yellow pages, the yellow book, an actual, phone book to actually look people up and call them. That was 1998, which is crazy to think that that's how it was up until that point. And
Yeah.
the successful guys had literally these Rolodex business card things that would just roll on their desk. And I'm just like, oh my God, right? There's got to be a better way. And so CRM is absolutely critical. So, I kind of joke because I started out with ACT. It was like ACT 3.0, then ACT for Aries, then CoStar Aries, CoStar 2000, and then eventually I found my way to REA, which Tim Cray, big shout out to him, love that guy. He listens, and he has anytime I have a request for the platform on RealNex, he takes it to heart. And of course, I bother him enough to where he'll eventually make it work. So CRM, absolutely critical. So that way you can kind of keep track of people and what is important to them. And then Excel, I still use Excel like it's going out of style. So those two are definitely the mainstay. So CRM, Excel, and then I would say the next thing is to have access to data. Luckily, over here in Phoenix and Maricopa County, we're a data-rich county to where you can find anybody and everything within 5-6 clicks, right? And so having the ability to do kind of that research through county websites, the Corporation Commission, just Google, which is kind of funny, being able to track people down that way. There's other sources to kind of look at. Obviously, our favorite company that I won't name, he who shall not be named.
800-pound gorilla.
He who shall not be named. So
Okay.
I'm afraid he might come back or something.
Right. Well, let me just call out one little thing there. You mentioned, I think, the county assessor's website, Google, and then the state's corporation or registrar or secretary of state. It varies state to state, right? But like all three of those really free resources to get a lot of data about properties and ownership and get a lot of intelligence before having to pay a few $100s a month for a subscription service. And a lot of people out there selling a lot of data, and many of them just scraping data off those public records and putting it into a nice dashboard. So you're getting started in this business. That's a terrific place to look. I know I use it every day, just like you do probably, in addition to some of our other tools, which you might have been getting into. But yeah, absolutely great tip there.
Yeah, and keep in mind, if you develop a relationship with a title company, a lot of them have different title apps that allow you to pull up the next level of hopefully peeled back onion on the ownership data. But there's I'm always beta testing new tech. Recently Alpha Map. That's kind of a fun one. I'm dealing with that guy out of San Antonio. He's a startup, and giving him some ideas and thoughts. Land Vision, Land Glide. All these different ones are out there for kind of that idea of visually looking at a map and saying, okay, I know this one's for sale. Who owns the properties next to it, right? And so, there's those. Obviously, with CCIM, you get Site to Do Business, which then has ESRI as the demographic backbone for that. ESRI powers Maricopa County's website, powers a lot of state websites and city websites. And so I would tell people to, if you go that direction, that's definitely a great member benefit and tool that is just, it's so powerful to have access to all this stuff. Sometimes just being a dumb broker here, you just kind of get lost in what you have access to. So
Yeah, that's good. I mean, there's a couple of those that I've heard of and a couple that I haven't, so I'm excited to go check those out. What about when you're breaking down a site in this is probably one of my biggest challenges or ways to add value. I'm thinking about things like demand and kind of meeting demand versus trying to create it and going to the path of progress, or making sure you're not buying a site that's not really in an undesirable part of town, or asking the question of who's going to be the best fit to backfill this vacancy with, or if you've got a newly acquired, nearly vacant building, what would be the top 2 or 3 categories to target? And maybe that's more of a leasing broker question, but something tells me you've got a sense of where you would look for those, and it might be a combination of some of those tools you just mentioned.
It absolutely is. So, I mean, one of the, I hate to sound like a broken record, but one of the CCIM classes is market analysis and void analysis. And what they do is you spend basically a week learning how to do your economic-based employment, look at void analysis, and using the ESRI, the site to do business tool. And you can see from right there, your high-level demographics, and then you can start drilling down and start seeing, okay, well, if I have a coffee shop over here, is there enough demand for a coffee shop here? That's kind of your marketplace analysis that you got to start with, is because at the end of the day, especially in retail, it's all driven by consumer spending. And so you need to know the buying power of that trade area. Mm-hmm. And, unfortunately, it takes kind of really going to the site and looking at it and making sure you're not missing something. I mean, the feet in the street is still by far probably the best way to really confirm what all these other data sources will tell you. And, and it's just kind of one of those things, after doing it after so long, I can drive up to a corner and say, okay, here's the issues, and just know it because of how many transactions you've done, versus trying to rely on data, because sometimes data can be skewed. I mean, as we know, I can make everything look like it's going to be a 20% internal rate of return given enough time.
Nick's sixth thing on that. There. That's good. Okay, let's jump to your favorite investments. So right now, if you were going to stroke a check to buy something, what would that look like? If you could really, get into the specifics, or, you could highlight something that you just purchased, because I know you've been very active recently too. So I'll let you decide, or cover both of those.
So obviously not compete with my clients. That's the number one goal. So, and the stuff that I have invested in has been multi-tenant retail. Why? Because I've seen my clients be very successful owning it over the 20 years of doing this. And, at the end of the day, I know everybody said that retail is dead, it's going to die, Amazon's going to kill everything. It hasn't materialized, and I don't see it materializing. And even if it does materialize, I'd rather still own a very highly visible piece of real estate that I could repurpose. And that's kind of what you're seeing. And, I even see it here at the mall, right? Weebly Parker, Casper, some of these other online native stores were only online. Guess what? Now they're getting a brick and mortar presence. And, that's the one thing that out of all the property types I still just like is multi-tenant retail, single tenant assets. I'm very risk averse. I don't know if that's just because that's my client base. So buying something that's 100% vacant scares the bejesus out of me. So I probably won't be doing that. But, if there's some way to solve that 100% vacant in relatively short order, then I'd probably consider something like that if it was in the right location. The centers that I'm partnered up on, mainly mom and pop tenants, mainly 12 to 1,500 square foot bays, good visibility, good signage, and that's just kind of stuff that I like. I'm considering looking at some single tenant stuff. I'd love to, because obviously being a young guy like you, I've got a long time horizon. So if you buy a couple single tenant deals and you structure the debt right and the income right, and by the time I finally do decide to retire, which is probably like 80 years from now, I'd have a passive income to offset any brokerage related income.
I love it. I love it. Let me hit you with a couple follow-ups. Is there any parts of town that you're either really hot on or you might want to stay away from?
So me, I love Tempe. I live there, been heavily involved with just nonprofits in general. That's another thing that I would tell anybody new to the business: get involved with whatever city you live in or what city you want to work in. So love Tempe. It's 42 square miles in the center of Phoenix. And if you look at the city of Phoenix, it's shaped like an hourglass, and everything goes through Tempe. Then you have Sky Harbor, then you have ASU, then it's just amazing. Freeway access, like rail, streetcars. Tempe is like the big city inside of Phoenix. And so I've always loved anything in Tempe. Problem is, so is everybody else.
Yeah.
And pricing got real expensive, but that's just kind of what happens. And if you believe in a location and you have a long enough time horizon, I would tell you that you should be fine. Some of the areas that still scare me a little bit as far as kind of different investments is when you start getting too far in the fringes. I saw how bad that work ended up for a lot of clients that got some of those properties that were housing to come. And that did not turn out well in 2009, 10, and 11, 12, maybe a little bit of 13. But right now, I would say I haven't seen any speculative development, which is good for our market, which is also another reason why there's so much competition for any asset that hits the market. And I would tell you that, I don't know about office yet. I've sold a lot of office buildings. I think it's still too early to tell how COVID's really going to impact us there. Because everybody's working from home, but they kind of want to be in an office. You hear one statement that everybody's coming back, then you hear they're going to delay it come back, then you hear, oh, well, we're going to reconfigure the office, so they're going to downsize. Well, that really never materialized because they had to space everybody out. And so office is just one of those, I think if you have the right kind of patient money and you can pick up a good deal today, I think you'll be fine. Yeah. But you better be very selective on it.
Totally in agreement with you on that. I got more follow-up questions. When you say fringe, are you thinking, a half hour out? Are you getting an hour out from, around the airport? Like at what point does it kind of start to drop off? Like in Phoenix, we always talk about the loop, right?
Right. So when you start going outside the first set of loops, so 101, 202. So then, but then there's so much activity and momentum going between 303 and 101 right now in the West Valley with all the industrial announcements and big warehouses that are going out there. And then when you start going north, you've got 74, which is kind of, Carefree Highway. That's kind of a stopping point. Once you kind of go north of that, it gets kind of sparse up there. Not only from housing, but also just from development standpoint. There's just not a lot of inventory. Yeah. Southeast Valley, you start getting out there past the 202 in the Southeast Valley. Once you get to kind of Queen Creek, Santan, there's a little pocket there. You got Eastmark kind of coming together, north and east of that. But if somebody said, hey, I've got this really awesome deal in like Globe, I'd probably still question it.
Yeah.
So okay. At least for multi-tenant retail, single tenant stuff, that's more credit driven and more tenant driven and kind of lease term. And, most of those guys that are building that new development or going into some of those single tenant deals, they're, usually their rents commensurate with that individual market, and usually their store sales should be able to support them. You'd be good, and then you're just kind of banking on long-term growth.
What about digging in a little bit deeper on single tenant versus multi-tenant properties? Because like the cap rates that I'm seeing on single tenant net lease deals with credit tenants are jaw dropping to me. I don't even know if like it can cover the debt without putting 50% down, and so that seems like it's a little niche that's just absolutely on fire. Maybe pros and cons of that versus multi-tenant. You almost sounded like you were a little more intrigued by multi. Maybe not. Maybe having both is good.
So yes, having both would be good. So single tenant, I was actually having lunch with a local group that, they're selling a new 20-year ground lease deal sub 4, and I'm like, okay, now we're over there with California. And my buddy Chad, I know he sold a bellwether ground lease McDonald's. I think it was a year or two ago. His new 20 years, and there was like a 3.75 cap, and I'm like, well, I guess it's better than 0.25% interest that you're going to collect at the bank for just sitting on money, right? And that's kind of what we're seeing right now on the single tenant stuff is really when my alternative investments are. Do I want to put in the stock market that gyrates significantly daily? 10-year T-bills are at like 1%, 1.2, 1.3. A bank might give me a CD rate of 0.5, maybe 1% if you push them hard enough, right? Or I can go buy a safe, secure ground lease deal that at least will pay me 4% return, and then hopefully over 20 years, maybe they'll renew the lease and I'll get a bump, or maybe they won't, and then I've got a piece of property that's 20 years from the point in time I bought it to 20 years from now, who knows what it's going to be like, right? I mean, no one anticipated kind of the boom along the light rail when it first came through in Tempe or going through Phoenix, and so that's only 15 years old, and you can just see the values were before the light rail went in and after the light rail. So 20 years solves a lot of problems when you look at kind of a hold period. So I know I didn't probably answer your question directly, but
no, I mean,
I agree. But there's, and plus the price points, they're under $5 million.
Right, more bite-sized deals. But okay, so then on the flip side, when you think about multi, what are the pros of that versus single tenant?
Well, the pros on multi-tenant is you actually you have the ability to have shorter term leases. Most of your tenants are going to be 3, 5, 10-year leases. You're going to be able to get some rental increases on those tenants. If a tenant doesn't make it, and say they were signed 5 years ago when the market was a lower rent than today, you're going to be able to get that kind of lift. I know that was kind of the strategy on one of the deals that I partnered on. The average rents were like $10 in the market, right around it was 18. So, you kind of want vacant space so that way you can get, potential $8 a lift.
Yeah.
And you get that on a single tenant net lease deal. You're buying that strictly for cash flow, and your alternative is CDs or treasurers.
Good nuggets. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about what you've been working on before we close it out here. So any favorite transactions that we should highlight? It's deal makers, right? And you are an absolute deal maker. I feel like I don't log into LinkedIn without seeing one of your closings every other day. And then if you want, you could tie that into, how you're serving your clients at a high level and the folks that you work with. And again, some of the stuff that maybe differentiates you from, other brokers out there. So I'll let you take it away.
I'm blessed to have really good clients to work with. I joke, I've sold the same property multiple times, and that there's no other way to describe that other than you treat people openly, honestly, fairly, and you kind of don't sugarcoat anything. You just kind of say, hey, this is what you can expect, and this is kind of how you can do it, and then when they lay out that plan and follow that plan, and they remember who kind of helped them out, and most of the people I work with are very loyal. So one of my favorite transactions that I sold back in 2004, which kind of really was the transition of apartments into retail, was Shops at 38th Street. And, the guy that bought it stayed in contact, helped him buy a couple other properties, helped him sell a couple properties. And, 16 years after ownership, he finally decided to sell and helped him sell it. And we sold it in COVID at a very good price point. And same thing with another value add deal that I sold it 3 times. I helped the first guy sell it to a group that bought it in mid 2000s. They operated it and then they sold it. And so, I would say that the majority of the stuff that I like to work on is stuff I've already worked on previously. And what has attracted me previously is probably why I keep sticking around them, right?
Yeah.
So I would say those are kind of the types of transactions that I would say are always fun to work on. Just because I, like anybody else, I put together this fancy pro forma model, and I just kind of curious if it ever hits it, right? Because it's all a bunch of projections until after you sell it.
Yeah.
So, couple current deals that I've recently done is, a lot of single tenant Circle Ks. Sold a handful of those recently, all shorter term, with the idea that, the buyer is going to be able to have an opportunity to negotiate with Circle K to hopefully push those rents, because these were older, built in the 70s, 60s. Also sold a couple properties that were former restaurants that got repurposed to another restaurant and sold. So, unfortunately, done a lot of land. I'm not a fan of land, but I've sold a lot of land recently. And that's just, I think, because of clients that just had land holdings that they had bought in addition to what they already had.
Yeah.
And, that was kind of their appreciated model, that there was just kind of a savings account.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one of the most recent land deal I did was the 48 acres over in Apache Junction. And it was interesting working with the town of Apache Junction, because it's kind of a piece that's kind of a gateway into the city. And we had to find the right buyer for that deal. And somebody that would work with the city, understands what the city wants. And, we finally found that right person. It took a while to find that right person, but once we found him, he gets it, he understands it, and he's going to be very successful at it at that location. So
I've got a couple fire round questions maybe that we didn't get to here from RJ, which could be interesting for a lot of people. I gather, you've answered something like this a lot of times. So key pieces of advice that you would get to maybe either a first-time investor or a new investor, or I would even expand that, Nick, and say, hey, maybe they've done a single family or a duplex, or they've owned a 4-unit, and now, they're thinking maybe a little bit bigger on the commercial platform. And you might have given some of this to us already, but, what are some of the things that you would want them to be thinking about or aware of?
So you don't know what you don't know until you get into it. Right. Right now we're kind of in a situation where lending sources are plentiful still for different aspects of the market. And I always tell people, hey, if you can buy a $5 million property, why don't you start off by buying a $2 million property first? See how that works. Kind of scale back even though you could qualify for something, doesn't necessarily mean you should buy it. The other thing I would tell them to do is maybe talk to guys like you that syndicate deals, because you're doing multiple deals all the time, and maybe they partner with you or JV with somebody that's active in the space. I know no one likes to have partners, but if you have the right kind of partner going into a deal, somebody with experience, either from a brokerage perspective or an ownership perspective, there's value in experience, and that value cannot be undersold or understated. And so I would absolutely try to partner with somebody, or try to invest maybe with somebody, at least on your first deal, or scale back what you would buy. So if you came to me and said, hey, I want to go buy a $10 million retail center, do you own any? No. Do you own any commercial property whatsoever? No, this will be my first one. Okay, let's scale this back. Let's just go buy a little 5-tenant small strip center. Get your arms around that. Make sure you still want to go after more, because you can always buy more. Don't bet the house on one deal.
Sage advice. Very, very good. And I might throw a little thumbs up for partnering. Yes, I do my own deals. I bring partners in who are more passive investors, and I think it's been a great way for them to continue, crushing it in their career as a doctor and not have to, do some of the ground game that maybe you and I do week in and week out.
Right.
But on the flip side, I've also written checks and partnered with other people in either geographies or asset classes that I want exposure to. So I invest in apartment buildings and storage facilities and mobile home parks outside of Phoenix. And I really only do that with other syndicators or partners because I want their local expertise. I want their insider deals. I want their operational economies of scale. And so absolutely, there's ugly partnerships, but there are some beautiful ones too, where it's just been like, wow, this is a hell of a lot easier than me doing deals on my own. It takes no energy or effort. So good points on both of those. Absolutely.
And when crowdfunding got real popular, what was it, about 7 years ago? I was intrigued by how crowdfunding, like just kind of the opportunity for smaller investors to participate, and there's a couple of different platforms out there. And because I know my clients were going to ask me about it, I went and I invested in one that I just wanted to see how it worked, right? And so it was very fascinating because it kind of reminded me of the same model of the old ticks back in the early 2000s. I said, okay, this is basically being structured the same way. It's just, reskinning it, calling it something different. But the mechanisms of how it operates and how it's going to work through a sponsor with asset management fees, I picked an asset that was here in town just because, one, I knew the asset, and I'm like, okay, worst case scenario, I'll just get my money back. I'm not too worried about it. But I want to see how they communicate with their investors, how they are showing reports, how, and it was a good learning experience for me. So, I would tell anybody that, that's a very simple way just to kind of dip your toe into a commercial real estate deal without even having a lot of skin in the game is, there's plenty of crowdfunding platforms out there you can check out, and 50, 100 grand here or there. I know I say that casually, but that's a good way to at least get exposure to it outside of buying stocks and REITs, right? So
love it. Let me, Nick, pull up your personal cell phone number so the whole world has it. Just kidding.
What?
No. I've got your email here. So, a lot of folks are going to tune in from all different walks of life. Who are the types of folks who should reach out to you for what? Just so that they know, hey, Nick can help me solve this issue.
Listen, if you're getting nowhere with your current help, chances are I could probably help. Right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's kind of what it boils down to, is having seen and done different types of properties, leased it, sold it, been around doing it for over 20 years. I mean, I haven't really seen anything that surprises me anymore. Let's just put it that way. And there's usually a creative solution somewhere, somehow, that we could come up with. So I would say if it's a difficult property, hey, those are kind of fun to work on. But also I do like working on retail and single tenant stuff. So, if there's anything I can do to help with those type of assets, either, sell them or get you with like a good manager or a good leasing team, I'm always a good source to help kind of get you in the right direction.
And I would like to go on record and do a mini testimonial for you here. Before I had ever closed a commercial deal in your backyard, you were helpful, you were responsive, you were so informative, you were, taking the time when maybe I didn't, give you the confidence that I had the ability to close. And you did everything that you described that you would do, without knowing that I would be around for, years to come and get more and more active in this space. So, you're so thoughtful, you're so knowledgeable, you're responsive, you know so much about so many buildings all around town. You mentioned, that knowledge and that experience being invaluable, and I absolutely could not agree more. It's like you're worth your weight and then some. And I just continue to be such a big believer in partnering, and working with brokers like you to make sure that, you know, we can build our portfolio and that we can scale and grow and not have missteps, and, you know, help us see the things like you just did on 2 of my transactions that you're not even involved in, you know, helping me to find some very you know, detailed, intricate stuff that, you know, maybe not even the brokers working on those transactions were aware of. So case in point, and huge testimonial, and a big thank you, Nick, for all that you do, not just for me, but I know you're doing it for all the clients that you work with, and you are the man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Always happy to help.
Great to spend time with you, brother. We'll talk soon. Thank you. Thank you guys for tuning in. Like we said, make sure you connect with Nick, ask us anything in the comments or feedback, or connect with him directly offline. Take care, guys.
All right. Bye.